My sister smiled like she'd already won and said, "Nobody's buying your ridiculous invention. Go back to your office job." My cousin laughed before she finished. The whole table joined in. I kept eating my soup. The next morning, my phone stopped feeling like a phone. It felt like a verdict. The soup was a butternut squash bisque. My mother makes it every October. Same pot, same recipe, same ceramic bowls with the blue rim she's had since the 90s. I remember focusing on it very deliberately. The color, the warmth, the specific weight of the spoon in my hand. Because if I focused on the soup, I didn't have to look at my sister's face. Ava was smiling. Not the smile she uses at work or in photos. The other one. The one she reserves for family dinners when she's located the weak point in the room and decided tonight is the night to press it. She had found mine years ago and returned to it with the reliability of weather. "Nobody's buying your ridiculous invention," she said. "Seriously, Marcus, stop embarrassing yourself and go back to your office job." My cousin Dylan, sitting to her left in the gray Patagonia vest he wears like a personality, snorted before she even finished the sentence. Then Aunt Carol laughed. Then my uncle. Then two of my cousins whose names I cannot say I remember correctly, which tells you something about how much they had previously mattered to my life. The whole table laughed, and I picked up my spoon, and I kept eating my soup. Not because I was small, not because I had nothing to say, because I already knew what none of them did. And I had exactly 14 hours until the rest of the world found out too. Let me tell you about the version of me that would have argued back. He existed. 3 years ago, he was very real. He worked as a data analyst at a mid-size insurance firm in Columbus, Ohio, sitting in a cubicle on the 4th floor of a building that smelled permanently of recycled air and someone's microwaved fish. He made $63,000 a year, which was enough to be comfortable and not enough to feel like a destination. He wore the kind of clothes that signal effort without ambition. He had performance reviews that called him reliable and thorough, which are the professional equivalents of being told your soup is warm. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 31 years old. I'm the middle of 3 children, which means I occupied the demographic space of being neither the eldest's accomplishment nor the youngest's charm. I was the middle. I was reliable. I was thorough. I was also, in my lunch breaks, filling the backs of printed work reports with product sketches. The problem I kept returning to was specific. Small businesses were getting wiped out by ransomware and phishing attacks at a rate that nobody was talking about loudly enough. The big cybersecurity players had enterprise solutions with enterprise price tags. SAP, Palo Alto Networks, CrowdStrike. They were not built for the dental office on Broad Street or the 3-person accounting firm in Worthington. Those businesses had QuickBooks and a prayer. I wanted to build something that bridged that gap. A physical security key device. Think a USB-scale hardware token with an onboard micro firewall that small business owners could actually afford, actually configure without a dedicated IT team, and actually trust with the data that kept their operations alive. I told Ava about it at dinner in March of that year, which was my first real mistake. She had looked at me across the table with the patience of someone waiting for a child to finish a sentence. "So it's like a USB drive," she said. "It's significantly more than a USB drive," she repeated. Dylan thought that was hilarious. That was the first dinner. There were many more. My co-founder found me through a forum post. Her name was Priya Subramaniam. She had spent 4 years at a network security firm in Cincinnati before leaving to finish an MBA at Fisher College of Business at Ohio State, which is where she found my forum post describing the product gap I'd identified, and which she later told me was the most precisely framed problem statement she'd read from someone who wasn't already being paid to think about it. She called me on a Thursday evening in June. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage of my apartment building because the cell signal was better there. She talked for 11 minutes without stopping. I took notes on my phone in the dark. By August, we had an LLC. By October, we had a first prototype. The first prototype overheated. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean the casing got hot enough to be uncomfortable to hold. We scrapped it. The second prototype was better in every way, except that during stress testing, it created a directory conflict that briefly threatened to corrupt the test drive we'd mounted. Priya caught it at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. We were on a Zoom call and she said, "Oh, that's interesting," in a voice that meant the opposite. We scrapped it. The third prototype almost worked, which, in hardware development, is the most expensive kind of almost. All of this happened while I was still employed at the insurance firm. I was using vacation days for prototype testing sessions. I was spending lunch breaks in my car on calls with component suppliers. My performance reviews remained sterling because I am, in fact, reliable and thorough, and those qualities don't turn off just because you're building something at midnight. The dinners continued. Every family gathering, Ava found a new approach to the same theme. In November, still doing the gadget thing? In January, Priya must have infinite patience. In March, Dylan's brother-in-law works at a startup. You should ask him what a real one looks like. Dylan laughed on cue each time. He had a remarkable talent for it. I made the mistake of sharing a real win in April of that second year. We had a paying client, Walsh Accounting, a 4-person firm in Westerville, Ohio, run by a woman named Sharon Walsh, CPA, who had lost 6 weeks of client data to a ransomware attack 18 months prior and had been operating in a state of low-grade trauma about data security ever since. She paid us our first real invoice. It was not a large number, but it was real, and it had someone's signature on it, and I was proud in the way you're proud when something stops being theoretical. I mentioned it at dinner. Ava didn't let me finish the sentence. "Is this still the thing you're losing sleep sleepover instead of building an actual career? The table laughed. My aunt made a Shark Tank joke. Dylan said something about garage inventors that I chose not to retain. I stood in the kitchen afterward, rinsing a plate that did not need rinsing, and I felt something change in me. Not break, change. The way ice changes when it gets cold enough, it doesn't shatter. It just becomes harder to penetrate. That night, I made a decision. I stopped explaining. Silence had always been available to me. I had just been choosing conversation instead, hoping that the right framing would produce the right response. I let go of that hope without grief, which was its own kind of clarity. We named the company LatchCore, because real security holds when everything else gives way. Priya designed the logo, a clean geometric latch mark, navy on white. I hired our first part-time contractor, a firmware developer named James Okonkwo, who had done embedded systems work for a defense subcontractor in Dayton, and who joined us for a below-market rate because, he said, he was tired of working on things he couldn't explain to his parents. I filed the formal trademark registration on a Saturday morning in November. The filing number was 970841,203. I remember it because it was the first number that made the company feel like a fact rather than a hypothesis. By spring of year 2, we had 7 locations onboarded with a regional dental group called Meridian Dental Partners, based in Dublin. Their IT director was a man named Robert Chen, who had attended a Chamber of Commerce cybersecurity panel where Priya presented, and who had, by his own description, sat up very straight during her section. He called us the following week. Robert signed the contract on March 3rd. I signed my resignation from the insurance firm on March 5th. Both felt correct. Referrals followed Meridian, an ophthalmology group, a family law firm in Worthington, a veterinary chain with 4 locations. We were not scaling like a consumer app. We were scaling like something people recommended to people they trusted, which is slower and stickier and ultimately more durable. An angel investor named Patricia Guerrero, who ran a Columbus-based fund called 11th Street Ventures and had been passed on us twice before, called in the fall and said, and I wrote this down because I knew I would want it later, "The discipline in your iteration log is unlike anything I've seen from a hardware team this small." She led a seed round of $340,000. We used it to hire James full-time, add a second firmware engineer, and move out of the co-working space we'd been renting by the month into a real office on Schrock Road. A journalist named Kevin Marsh, who covers Midwest tech for a newsletter called Corridor Report, wrote about us in January. The piece was titled "The Hardware Founders Nobody's Watching Yet." It ran 1,400 words and described LatchCore as solving the last mile of small business cybersecurity with surgical restraint. The piece spread in exactly the channels where it mattered: LinkedIn posts from CFOs, a retweet from the National Small Business Association's account, a mention in a CISO newsletter with 40,000 subscribers. 6 weeks after the piece ran, I got an email from a woman named Sandra Ose, Director of Corporate Development at Archon Systems. Archon is a publicly traded cybersecurity company headquartered in Reston, Virginia. They trade on NASDAQ. Their 2023 annual revenue was $1.4 billion. They are not a company that emails small hardware startups for social reasons. Sandra's email was 4 sentences. The last one read, "We'd like to discuss a potential acquisition of LatchCore at your earliest convenience." I read it twice at my desk on Schrock Road at 9:22 on a Tuesday morning. Then I closed my laptop. Then I sat very still for approximately 4 minutes. Then I called Priya. There was a silence on the phone that I will never forget. Then she said, "Okay, stay calm. Call Daniel." Daniel was Daniel Park, our attorney. Daniel S. Park, JD of Park & Ellison LLP in Columbus, a corporate law firm he had co-founded in 2019 after 8 years at a national firm in Chicago. He was 37, absurdly well-organized, and had a reputation for M&A negotiations that Priya had researched before recommending him. He was the person we had retained early, before we needed him, which he later told us was the single best decision small company founders consistently failed to make. Daniel took the call on the first ring. "Send me the email," he said. "Don't respond to it yet." The next 6 weeks were the most disorienting of my professional life, not because they were bad, because they were genuinely good, and I had no template for that. Daniel Park flew to Reston twice. He spent 4 hours on calls with Archon's legal team on a Friday that I remember primarily as the Friday I walked laps around the Schrock Road parking lot for 90 minutes because I couldn't sit still. Sandra Ose and I spoke twice, calls that were friendly in the manner of calls where both parties understand that friendliness is a form of professionalism and not an indication of final terms. The number Archon offered in the letter of intent was not the number in the final agreement. The final number was higher. I am not going to write it here for the same reason pilots don't discuss the exact weight of the cargo mid-flight. Suffice to say, it was enough that when Daniel Park said it to me plainly on the phone, I had to ask him to say it again, which he did, patiently, because he had clearly seen this reaction before. Priya cried, not dramatically. She made a small sound and then was silent and then said, "We actually did it," in a voice so quiet it sounded like someone confirming a dream while still inside it. James Okonkwo sent me a text that read, "I told my parents last night. My mom lit a candle. I did not respond immediately because I was in the parking garage of my apartment building, and I was not doing well at being a composed person. I told no one in my family. Silence had protected me on the way up. It would protect me on the way out." The final board approval vote at Archon was scheduled for Monday morning. My mother's family dinner was Sunday evening. I decided to go. I arrived at 6:15 with a bottle of Maomi Pinot Noir and a face I had practiced in the bathroom mirror twice that afternoon. afternoon. Calm, present, unremarkable. My mother hugged me at the door. She smelled like butternut squash, the October smell, the dinner smell. For approximately 20 minutes, it almost felt like any other Sunday. Then my father mentioned an article he had seen in a business section about small company cybersecurity demand increasing. That was the kindling. Ava's smile arrived before she even lifted her head. "Oh," she said into her spoon. "Are we still doing that?" Dylan snorted. The two cousins I cannot name readied their audience faces. "Yeah," Dylan said, leaning back. "Keep the inventor fantasy alive, Marcus. Someone's gotta believe it." The table laughed. The half laugh. The one that gets used when cruelty needs plausible deniability. When you want to wound someone and then, if pressed, say you were just joking. Relax. I kept eating. Steady hands. I checked them under the table. Steady. Ava leaned forward with the particular body language of someone who has decided to go the extra inch. "Has your genius little gadget actually made money yet?" The table went quiet. Not completely, but in the way of a room that suddenly wants an answer, it has decided to find entertaining. I took a sip of water. "You'll know soon enough," I said. Dylan laughed. Ava shook her head like my non-answer was confirming her entire thesis. "My aunt said something I couldn't quite hear and didn't try to." I drove home at 8:47 p.m., set my alarm for 6:30 a.m., made a cup of chamomile tea I didn't finish, lay on top of my bed covers and stared at the ceiling for a while. Then I went to sleep. At 8:12 a.m., Monday, Daniel Park called. "Board approved," he said. "Final documents are being prepared now. We should have signatures by 11. I was sitting at my kitchen counter in yesterday's sweatshirt. I said, "Okay." He said, "Marcus, you understand what I'm telling you?" "Yes," I said. "Okay," he said. "Congratulations. For real." The documents came at 10:44 a.m. I signed them at my kitchen counter with a pen I had to find in a junk drawer. The pen was from a Hyatt hotel. I remember thinking that was funny. At 1:47 p.m., Archon Systems issued the press release. Archon Systems acquires LatchCore, expanding small business cybersecurity portfolio. By 2:28 p.m., the headline was on TechCrunch, the Wall Street Journal's tech section, and 17 other places I watched appear on my Google alert in real time, with the slightly surreal quality of watching a domino chain you set up months ago finally reach the other end of the table. At 2:51 p.m., Sandra Osei sent me a personal email that said, "Welcome to the family. You built something that mattered." I read it 3 times. At 3:10 p.m., my phone stopped feeling like a phone. It felt like weather. Patricia Guerrero from 11th Street Ventures called at 3:14. Kevin Marsh from Corridor Report called at 3:22 to ask for a comment. James Okonkwo sent a voice memo that was mostly ambient noise and him saying "bro" repeatedly. Robert Chen from Meridian Dental texted, "New from day one. Congratulations." Sharon Walsh, the accountant who signed our first real invoice, sent a card through LinkedIn that I read 4 times because it was so genuinely kind. At 3:34 p.m., Dylan's text arrived. "I always knew you were going to do something incredible, man. Proud of you." I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I laughed. Actually laughed. Out loud. Alone in my apartment. Not mean laughter. Just the laughter of a man who had eaten soup patiently for 3 years and could now afford to find something funny. Then Ava called. I watched the phone ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 3:47 p.m. I watched that one ring too. At 3:52 p.m., her text arrived. 5 words. "We need to talk. Now." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was wrong." Not even, "Congratulations, Marcus." Just 5 words that told me exactly who she still was and exactly what she thought the moment was about. She thought this was her moment to reposition, to get ahead of the story, to arrive in my life as someone who had always believed in me before the evidence made that the profitable position to hold. I read the message. I put the phone face down on the counter, and I smiled. Here is what happened in the weeks after. Ava called 4 times in the first 3 days. I did not answer. She left 2 voicemails. I listened to both. The first was careful, warm in the performative way. "Congratulations up front." Pivot to, "We should catch up." The second was less careful. There was an edge in it, something that sounded like entitlement wearing the costume of hurt feelings. She texted again on day 4. "Can you at least respond? This is family." I thought about that word for a moment. Family. The invocation of it as a trump card, as if the biological connection retroactively changed the record, as if the butternut squash bisque dinners were not also family and also the place she had chosen, repeatedly, to use me as the room's entertainment. I responded on day 5. I wrote, "Hi Ava, I'm processing a lot right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready." That was true, and it was enough. Dylan's text I responded to 4 days in. I thanked him for the kind words. I kept it short. I have no particular anger toward Dylan. He was always Ava's audience more than his own person in those rooms. The laughter was borrowed. The cruelty was hers. He was just a speaker she plugged in. What I did not do, I did not send a group message. I did not post something pointed on social media. I did not write a long text to Ava laying out the chronology of dinners and comments with corresponding dates, which I will admit I had, at one point, partially drafted in the Notes app on my phone at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday during year 2, just to feel like it existed. I deleted it, because I always understood, even then, that the text was not for her. It was for the version of me that still needed explaining to be complete. That version was gone. Kevin Marsh published a follow-up piece in Corridor Report titled "The Quiet Build: How LatchCore's Marcus Webb Turned Silence into Strategy." It ran 2,200 words and opened with a quote from Patricia Guerrero describing my approach as the rarest combination in startup founders, patience as a competitive advantage. The piece included a line that I did not give him, but that he apparently sourced from James. He kept building after every dinner where his own family made him the punchline. That's not resilience, that's clarity. James later said he couldn't remember saying it. I told him it didn't matter. It was true either way. Sandra Osi flew to Columbus in November for what Archon called an integration kickoff. We had dinner at a restaurant downtown and she asked me, over roasted chicken and a very good burgundy, what had kept me going during the years before traction. I thought about how to answer that honestly. I stopped needing permission, I said. She looked at me. From investors? From anyone, I said. She nodded slowly. That's the whole game, she said. Most people never figure that out. My mother called in late October. Not Ava, not Dylan, my mother. She called on a Sunday afternoon when I was sitting at my desk reviewing the transition documents Archon's integration team had sent over. Her voice was careful in the way it gets when she is saying something she has prepared. I'm proud of you, she said. I've always been proud of you. I believed her. My mother's crime, if it could be called that, was the crime of many mothers in many rooms. She had not intervened. She had let the laughter continue because stopping it would have cost her something, and she was not sure the cost was hers to pay. I understood that better now than I would have 3 years ago. Thank you, Mom, I said. A pause. Ava is having a hard time, she said. Not Ava is sorry. Not Ava wants to make it right. Just Ava is having a hard time. As though my sister's difficulty were a weather event that had arrived from outside, unconnected to anything she had chosen. I know, I said. Will you talk to her? I looked out the window. The street below was October quiet. Leaves on the sidewalk. A kid on a bike moving through the intersection. When I'm ready, I said. Not before. My mother accepted that. She was wise enough to accept it. I met with Ava in November. Not at a family dinner. At a coffee shop on 5th Avenue in Columbus, a neutral location I chose deliberately. I arrived first and ordered a plain black coffee. She arrived 4 minutes late looking composed in the way of someone who has practiced composure. She sat down. She opened with something that was partially apology and partially narrative revision, a version of events in which her comments had been misinterpreted, in which the laughter had been affectionate teasing between siblings, in which she had, actually, believed in me, but had been worried and the worry came out wrong. I listened to all of it. Then I said, Ava, I know you. She stopped. I know what those dinners were, I said. I know what the smile was. I know what you'll know soon enough sounded like to you when I said it because I was watching your face. She looked at the table. I'm not here to punish you, I said, but I'm also not going to let you rewrite it. The record stays the record. I was scared for you, she said. Her voice had changed. Something underneath the composure was showing through. No, I said gently. You were scared of me. There's a difference. One is care and one is competition. She looked up. For a moment, she looked very young. Younger than 34, which is what she was. She looked like the person she had been before she learned to perform certainty at tables. I don't know what to do with this, she said. Neither do I said. But you start by telling the truth. To yourself first. We sat in silence for a moment. I finished my coffee. I'd like to get here, I said. Us. Eventually. But it takes time and it takes you showing up differently. Not just once. She nodded. I think she meant it. I won't know for a while. In January, Priya and I attended Archon's National Partner Conference in Austin. There were 400 people in a ballroom, and at one point, a slide went up on the main screen that said, Latchcore, protecting what others overlooked. And I stood in the back of that room with a glass of sparkling water and felt something I did not have the right word for until I was on the plane home. The word was settled, not celebrated, not triumphant. Settled. The feeling of having come to rest at a place that is actually correct. The version of me who sketched ideas on printed work reports in a cubicle on a Tuesday at noon. That man was not wrong about anything. He was just early, and the years in between were not failure. They were construction. The dinner table is still there. The soup is still butternut squash in October. My mother still uses the ceramic bowls with the blue rim. Scout, Dylan's dog, will still bark from the next room. The people will still talk around the subject of who is succeeding and who is not, because families are long negotiations with identity, and that does not change overnight. What changed was me. I no longer needed the table to confirm what I already knew. That is the only victory that actually holds. Dylan texted me in December. Hey, you ever need anyone on the sales side of things? Keep me in mind? Seriously. I read it. I did not laugh. I didn't respond for 3 days. Then I wrote, I'll let you know if something comes up, because I meant it. I actually meant it. Grudges are expensive. I can afford not to keep them, but I'm also not in a hurry. Ava texted me on New Year's Eve. I've been thinking about what you said. You were right about the difference. I read it at 11:53 p.m., 7 minutes before midnight, alone in my apartment with a glass of Mayomi Pinot Noir, the same label I had brought to that last Sunday dinner, which felt like a lifetime ago, and also like last week. 7 minutes of silence. Then my phone buzzed with the New Year texts from Priya, from James, from Daniel Park, from Robert Chen, from Patricia Guerrero, from Sharon Walsh the accountant, from Kevin Marsh, from Sandra Ose, from my mother, from the people who had been there. I replied to all of them first. Then I picked up Ava's message again, and I typed back 2 words. Thank you. Not, it's fine. Not, I forgive you. No worries. Let's pretend. Just, thank you for saying the true thing, finally, in the right direction, even if she was still learning to mean it all the way through. Some things take time. The company took 3 years. The table will take longer. That's okay. I know how to be patient.